complete pivot. But it has been a good journey. I work with Monumental Sports and Entertainment here in Washington, D.C. We own six sports teams, and we operate four different properties. You can see the Capitals, Wizards, the Mystics. We have two esports teams and a G League. So it's been a good run. At one point in time, we had two AFL teams also. So as the vice president of people and culture, I oversee, the employee life cycle. So that people and culture is what we call our human resources function. So excited to share all of the gems that I can share with you today. I've been with the organization now. It was 9 years in February, which is crazy. But I will say working in sports is a lot of fun, and time goes by very quickly.
Thanks, John. Let's go ahead and have Christina introduce herself.
Hi, I'm Christina Curry King. I am a sports dietitian with Memorial Hermann Ironman Sports Medicine Institute in Houston, Texas. I graduated from Furman in 2013, and I'm actually a Houston native. So I went out to South Carolina for school and then came back to Texas afterwards. But in my role, so I'm employed through the hospital. We have a sports medicine wing of our hospital, and that's who I'm employed through, but I get to do a lot of different things. And so through that role, through the hospital, I consult one-on-one with people, and that could be anyone from age 5 and up for nutrition counseling. And then I also work with a couple high schools. So in Texas, high school football is a big deal, and also just like high school sports in general, and they take it very seriously. So they have booster clubs that pay for our time. And so we go out and work with a couple high schools. I work with a small university, Houston Baptist University, kind of similar Furman-sized institution. So I provide sports nutrition consulting for their athletic department. And then I also teach a nutrition class there. And then my favorite part of my job, I think, is getting to work with the professional women's soccer team, the Houston Dash. And so I get to serve as their team dietitian.
Great. Thanks, Christina. And I like your shirt in the background.
Thanks.
Her Furman shirt from softball?
Volleyball.
Volleyball. Okay,
Mhm.
volleyball. Very good. All right, Dylan, let's go with you next.
Yeah. Hey, everybody. My name is Dylan Rowe. I'm a San Antonio, Texas native. Moved out to South Carolina to go to Furman, obviously. I graduated in 2017. I currently work as a senior data analyst for the Chicago Fire Football Club in Chicago, Illinois, for the professional soccer team of the state of Illinois. So in my role, I'm responsible for basically using the data that we have in our data warehouse to solve different kinds of complex business solutions and just help make more well-informed and kind of data-driven decisions. So whether that be through trying to figure out the best ways to optimize revenue gain, or increase fan engagement, or even make forecasts and predictions for revenue and attendance for the upcoming season. It's kind of all encompassing. So.
Great, thank you, Dylan. Rochelle, you want to go next?
Sure. Hi, everyone, and thanks, Lauren, for having me. My name is Rochelle Patel, and I am a Furman graduate 2012, communications and political science double major from Clemson, South Carolina originally. So sports has been in my blood from the beginning, but then went out to New York after, where I started working for Laureus and currently in Atlanta. So Laureus is a nonprofit organization. We are a foundation that funds groups who are using sport as a tool for social change. So our mission is to improve the lives of youth and unite communities through the power of sport. I'm director of marketing and partnerships, so I get to work across our corporate partners, which range from groups like NBC Sports and Mercedes-Benz to some of the leagues and teams in the cities where we work, to help bring in funding to support these grassroots organizations and then work with our athletes. We have over 200 ambassadors globally who support the work that we do. Here in the US, some of our ambassadors, Chris Paul from the NBA, Allison Felix, the Olympian. And so helping those athlete partnerships be able to reinvest into the communities that they care about and where we work. So excited to be here.
Thank you, Rochelle. All right, Manny, let's hear from you.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Manny Robinson. I'm an Anderson, South Carolina native, Furman class of 2006, communication studies major, and for 18 years worked in the upstate covering sports, the last 14 of which were spent at the Greenville News and for the USA Today Network. So Covered a little bit of everything from CISA soccer to neighborhood summer swimming leagues to Clemson national championships and the Masters. So got to do a little bit of everything over that span. But now I am a sports media instructor at the University of South Carolina. So I got out of the game a little bit. So I'm a full-time filmmaker and educator at this point.
Thank you, Manny. Appreciate that. So we'll take a little deeper dive, and we're going to start off by asking each of the panelists to share a little bit more about their career path. In particular, I'm interested in, how did you decide to pursue a career in sports? Is this something that you have kind of always been thinking about, or was this happenstance? So tell us a little bit about your career paths, and let's start there. So why don't we start with Dylan?
Yeah, so I guess I forgot to share earlier, during my time at Furman, I was a physics major. So, I guess how I decided I kind of wanted to get into sports is I grew up playing different sports, obviously, as a kid. As I got older, kind of specializing in soccer. So I played soccer at Furman during my tenure there. It's always been a major, major passion of mine. So kind of going through school, I remember getting to my junior, senior year and just thinking, what are some of the things that I really love to do in life, and what would I like to do in a career? And, I was kind of came to the conclusion that I really love soccer and I really love math and physics. So I was like, all right, let's see where that can take us. And, I went and got my master's after Furman in data analytics, and then really just pursued the sports industry. Got lucky enough to kind of land an internship with the Chicago Fire directly out of my master's, and then have been at the company for 3 years there. So my career kind of just started with the love and passion of soccer, and then really just seeking that out from there.
All right, thank you, Dylan. Rochelle, how about you? How did you get started with your career, and tell us, how did you decide to work in sports?
Yeah, so similar to Dylan, but obviously not as talented to play D1, I played sports all my life and loved it. Huge passion, watching, playing, everything about it. Come from a big sports family. At Furman, I played club soccer and did all the intramurals available, basically. So honestly, when I started on with my career, sports wasn't in the forefront. It was just something I did for fun, something I enjoyed. But I knew I wanted to do something that was going to be making a tangible impact and work in that space that would ideally be helping youth, and primarily youth from underserved communities. And so when I started working in that space, I was lucky enough to work for the British Consulate in New York City. And through that, I got connected with a program with the Premier League. And it wasn't intended for me, but when I was working there, I heard about this program. It was something I was passionate about. And so I kind of raised my hand to say, I'd love to work on that. And it was kind of me following that passion I had for sports, raised my hand to support something that I had an interest in, where I really was open to the field of sport for development or sports-based youth development, and really recognizing that everything that sport had taught me really goes beyond what you learn on the field, on the court, into how you can help someone become whatever it is they want to be and empower them to really be the best versions of themselves. And so when I discovered that world, I recognized I was kind of already in it, had already had some of the benefits myself going through it, but then I knew I could share that with others. I was like, this is the space I want to be in. And so I was lucky to meet the executive director of Laureus, which is actually a global organization. So our headquarters are in London. So through that program, connected with Laureus, and it just seemed like the perfect next step to marry a lot of my passions that I had done around international work, in the sports world, with kind of marketing, partnerships, fundraising, and then still benefiting youth. And so it was a nice, natural next step, but kind of a happy accident, but also I think it was about being intentional with what you're passionate about and where you want to make a difference. And when those things are able to marry up, it's a very enjoyable experience.
Thank you, Rochelle. Christina, how about you? How did you get started with your career? And is this something that you always kind of knew this is the direction you wanted to go?
Yeah, I don't think I did. I played volleyball at Furman, and I think I don't know that I even made the decision to do what I wanted to do until like the fall of my senior year as I was finishing up volleyball. And I think I kind of realized that I wanted to be around athletes and athletics in my career. And so I had this biology degree, and I wasn't going to go to med school to do like be an orthopedic surgeon or anything like that. And so I was just trying to find ways to apply this biology degree in a way where I can still work with athletes, and kind of ran across a woman back in Houston who was the dietitian for the Houston Texans at the time, and just kind of saw what she did. And I was like, that's a cool job. So after Furman, finished up with biology, got started my master's in nutrition at Texas A&M. And so, really got lucky with meeting people. To become a dietitian, there's a lot of kind of hoops you have to jump through. And so I was lucky that a lot of my coursework from Furman crossed over and I was able to use towards kind of a dietetics certificate. And then through my master's, they were really helpful with me kind of getting all the classes that I needed so I could be eligible for a dietetic internship, which is something that all dietitians have to do. And then matched to the dietetic internship in Houston. But before I did that, I had an internship opportunity. I spent a month with a sports dietitian in Indianapolis, and my primary role was working with guys who were transitioning from college to the NFL. So they're training in those few months before the combine. And so that really gave me my first hands-on experience of sport nutrition, and I was hooked. I was convinced this is what I want to do. So did my internship in Houston, got to work a little bit with the University of Houston and their athletics program, and serve alongside their dietitian there. And then after I finished up with my internship, I landed this job with Memorial Hermann, and so with their sports medicine institute. And I think it was really good timing because they just happened to have a spot open up as I was finishing my internship, but I had made an effort to kind of stick my foot in a couple doors and make some of those connections with the people at that facility. And so it ended up working out in my favor. So, and I've been with Memorial Hermann for 4.5 years now.
Awesome. Thank you, Christina. How about Manny? Let's hear a little bit about your career journey.
Okay, mine started very early. I grew up in a sports family. I'm the only one of my siblings who didn't play college athletics. But I knew I wanted to be around the game. So when my recruiting letters didn't roll in like my siblings. I'm the youngest of four, but I wanted to figure out I got to do something else. So I knew thought I wanted to coach, and so I had to do this like job shadowing thing as a part of our curriculum at high school. But I couldn't get a coach that allowed me to shadow them. So I had to find an alternative. And so the alternative was a gentleman named John Solomon, who was a college reporter for the Anderson Independent Mail, the local newspaper. And so one Saturday he took me to this no one was there. It was poorly attended, but it was a Clemson-Wofford basketball game on a Saturday, like an 11 o'clock a.m. tip. It was crazy. And it was like a game now, like it wasn't even on local TV. But to me, it was like the NBA Finals. I was wide-eyed, like cold pizza in the press room and sitting courtside, and I thought it was the coolest thing. And so I was hooked from there, and I had already like established myself. I knew I was a pretty good writer at that point, and this kind of put the two together. So that next semester, I joined the school paper, and then won an internship through that the summer after my senior year, after I graduated high school, at the Independent. So I got there, and my first story was on the new seatbelt law. So I got stuck on news side, and I was like, I gotta get out of here. I can't do this. This ain't it. This ain't what I got in here for. And so quickly, it kind of worked my way over across the hall to the sports section, and wrote my first story on a local tennis tournament, and just never looked back. So when I got to Furman, I was able to continue freelancing for the Independent. So my college experience is a little bit different than most, but like every Friday night I was at a different game. And so then doing a decent job there, I was able to now I'm number 3 or number 4 on Clemson on Saturday. And so after there, just earning trust and getting experience helped me move up. And so that was able to, through that and making a connection through an event someone was covering at someone from the Greenville News was covering at Furman, made a connection there and just say, you don't have any internships? And they didn't. But he says, like, send me your clips with, your bylines and things. That gentleman named E. Richard Walton. And he sent it to the managing editor, and they were like, look, we got to find a spot for him. And so I got an internship. So I worked there my summer between my junior and senior year. And then they had a wise gentleman left the business and went to law school. And so he was the high school reporter at the time. And so there was an opening there. So the timing was great for me. And they were like, hey, you want to stick around? I was like, sure. So it's like, yeah, you're right. Yeah. So my senior year at Furman, I worked full time. I was low man on the totem pole. And so I was covering like local, whatever, like anything, like hopscotch tournament or whatever it was. But I stayed through, like, as the business changed, and I never left. There were times where I tried to leave the Greenville News and it didn't work out for whatever reason. There were times where I had offers to move and I couldn't. But what happened is that beat just kind of grew around us. Like, Greenville has grown, and Clemson football grew into this powerhouse. And so from that, like, just being steady at, covering youth football or youth soccer, being steady at that, then moving to high schools, then moving to small colleges, covering Furman and Wofford and Presbyterian, and then moving to covering Clemson and South Carolina. It grew around me. So from that came the national radio appearances, the book deal, the films, and all of that. So I was fortunate that way, that I didn't, to move up kind of in the industry, I didn't have to move out of Greenville. So that's how it worked out for me. And then, through that, got invited to campuses and all of that, and kind of got a liking for being in the classroom. And Dr. John Armstrong, who many of you may know from the communications department, kind of put a bug in my ear, say, hey, you should think about going and get your master's so that you can teach, so that we can hire you. And so from there, like in 2016, I went to found a program that fit me, that I could, get a master's, but then also apply it to what I've been doing, my joy of storytelling. So then I started at Wake Forest in their documentary film program. And so that was one of the best decisions I ever made. And so I'm teaching full time and still doing storytelling, but I'm doing it for me, because the industry is changing. We can get into that a little bit later, but the demands on a reporter now are a lot different than when I started. So I was forced to do things later in my career that weren't in alignment with my principles and what I, being a storyteller, what I thought it was all about. And so I was able to position myself to leave on my own terms in an industry that a lot of my mentors and people before me didn't have that opportunity. So I've been very, very fortunate in my career to have the experiences that I had and be in the position that I am.
Annie, I'd love to hear how you followed your passions. All right, John, let's hear from you. I know that you didn't start out in sports, so we'd love to hear your story.
No, I'm similar here, but probably opposite. So poli-sci major, finished in 2009, had all intentions, and I did. I moved to DC. Let me go find a job on Capitol Hill. I got a bunch of no's, more no's, and a few more no's. And I landed my first job working in HR for Hyatt Hotels. So I saw HR as sort of a transferable skill. I was always, in high school, student body president on campus, president of Student League for Black Culture. So always sort of in the know, student leadership type positions. When you look at my family, I was definitely the casual sports fan. My brother was a collegiate athlete. I was just kind of like, who's playing tonight? So for me to work in sports, my brother's like, how did this happen? So I was at Hyatt for about 2 years, and then I saw an opportunity for growth in an HR manager role for a company called Monumental Sports Entertainment. It was like, oh, HR job, figure it out later. Then they reached out for the interview, and I was like, well, wait, this is kind of cool. And so that's how I landed in sports. There were no connections. I applied on Teamwork Online. If you are interested in working in sports, you need to be sure you are plugged into teamworkonline.com. That is where you're going to find a hotbed of sports jobs. There's a few other job boards, but that is where I applied. And some folks were like, well, did you know someone? I was like, no, I applied, and my resume somehow surfaced its way to the top. And 9 years later, this is where I am. So I definitely fell into it. It's been a great experience.
Love your story too. I think that's what happens to so many students is that, happenstance, things happen and you kind of end up where you're supposed to be. So thanks for sharing. So we've got, 5 great alumni with us tonight, all attended Furman. So I'm really kind of curious to hear about your Furman experiences. Was there anything particular about your Furman experience that's kind of helped you be successful in your current roles? And just your advice to our students. You've got about 40 students with us here tonight, and just your advice on what are some things that they should be doing during their time at Furman to make them competitive for these opportunities in sports. So, John, this time I'll start with you.
One thing I would say is, leverage a career office. During my time at Furman, it's sort of funny how I ended up in HR. A lot of my experiences sort of were guiding me to that way. I also was an admissions intern and worked in the admissions office all 4 years. Admissions is talent acquisition. I mean, we're recruiting people. So it's funny how that's all became full circle. But I would say try to leverage internships. I had the one internship in the admissions office, but I spent a lot of my time in summer sort of giving back by being counsel for Bridges to a Brighter Future, which is a very rewarding experience. But I would say, make sure you try to figure out ways that you can sort of align yourself, but also do things you're not sure about. This is the time when you can do it and realize I don't like it. I think Manny, I can't remember what the experience was. It was something he's like, I thought I wanted to do coaching maybe. And you're like, nah, that's not it. So I say take that time for like test and trial runs and figure out if it's what you like. And I would even say, I think most of us here or some here have talked about, going on to school beyond Furman. I highly recommend working a couple of years before you sort of figure out, before you specialize in something and realize that maybe that's not quite what I thought it was. So I say be flexible, go with the flow, find the opportunities, and network. There's no reason why at the end of this panel today, if you're interested in working in sports, you should not be in all of our LinkedIns with a personalized message. That's a tip I'm giving you. Personalize that LinkedIn invite and say, hey, heard you at the panel today. Would love to connect. I'm sure all Furman alum, if you're like me, I'm always going to talk to a Furman student or someone associated with the network because we're sort of small but mighty out here. And I would love to share any knowledge that I have. So that is what I would say. Build your network, go to the career services office and figure out how they can position you or connect you with alumni and go from there. But you have a very robust tool with LinkedIn.
Thank you, John. Really great advice. And I think our alumni network at Furman, I've worked at 3 or 4 different institutions and is by far probably one of the strongest alumni networks that I've experienced. Every time I reach out to an alumni, they're always very enthusiastic and happy to support our students at Furman. So great advice. Rochelle, let's hear from you. Is anything particular about your Furman experience that kind of stands out?
Yeah, funnily enough, it was studying abroad. So my junior year, I studied abroad in Edinburgh, Scotland. It was a communications program. But through that, I interned at the Scottish Parliament. And that was what really opened my eyes to kind of like international development and international work. And so it was really my passion for that originally landed me at the British consulate, which funny enough, speaking of the Furman network, I think the only reason I got an interview is because the hiring person at the DC consulate happened to be a Furman alumni. So that was great connection. But it was that, me wanting to work in international field that was sparked through studying abroad. And so I think you're never going to know what's going to really like spark your passions or spark your interests, and anything that you can do to enrich your own experience. I think sometimes we talk a lot about like the Furman bubble, but there's so much outside of the Furman bubble too. So definitely experience all that you can that Furman has to offer within, your classroom, within the career service office, but also plug into the community, go study abroad, join clubs, join different groups. You never know what connection that you make is going to be what leads to something in your career or what leads to a really enriching experience. And I would say for sport field in particular, if you're interested in doing anything at all that is on the community relations side, working with players, working in marketing, these people eventually are trying to make an impact at a local level. And so if you can connect with a local organization that is doing really powerful work wherever you are, so if that's the, mom and pop baseball program that has a group of kids in their neighborhood, or if it's the basketball program that has kids meeting and also doing homework help, you're going to really be an asset to any organization you join if you understand how you can really make that impact at the community level. So definitely, starting now, volunteer with those organizations, figure out what they are, what they're about, and you never know what those connections as well might make you stand out from someone else who has a lot of the on paper experience but doesn't have that community connection.
Great advice. Thanks, Rochelle. And let's go ahead and go to Christina. Any of your thoughts on any particular experience that really kind of helped you at Furman?
Yeah, I would say being an athlete obviously helps. And then I also got to work in the athletic department. So if you were interested in potentially pursuing a job was in sports, you know, working game operations, doing scoreboard, or helping with statistics. There's a lot of opportunities, I think, for willing participants. You can, you know, run the fun little games that they do, which I don't know if they're doing during COVID, but hopefully once COVID's over, they'll get back to doing some of those fun things during timeouts and things like that. So that's something that I took advantage of my senior year. And I think even more important than that was the Furman Advantage. So if you are interested in pursuing a role in sport that's like STEM, so science or math kind of related, I highly recommend you take advantage of the Furman Advantage and pursue some kind of research experience. So I did research at Greenwood Genetic Center one summer, and then my summer before my senior year, I did research with one of the professors on campus. And so I stayed with her in the summer. And that was, you know, even though it was in no way related to sports, that was hugely important, just learning research and learning how to read research and conduct research and understand the ins and outs. And then that gave me a huge leg up when I started my master's program because I had all of that background. So I really think the opportunity to participate in research at Furman was kind of the biggest impact on my career to this point.
Thank you, Christina. How about you, Manny? Out from your Furman experience?
Well, Furman is a little bit different. Even like I was thinking about like us being on trimester, that, you know, that the way the semesters were formatted then. And so what that allowed me to do, especially as a comm studies major, is take a bunch of classes of things that I knew nothing about, like, you know, over in the music building and not, so I guess to say, like, don't diminish the value of those experiences. It's like what John said, kind of step out outside and take some risk. And also, you know, what we said, step outside of the bubble. Like I said, when I was at Furman and spending every Friday night covering games, that was freelance work. So that was just like gas money. It wasn't really enough to hold me over. So I also had a job like working at Kirkland's, like selling overpriced home decor. And so that helped me kill my my interview at the News. They were more impressed by that than my clips, you know, like, and that allowed me, like, that helped me become a better interviewer. And so like the rhetoric classes I took at Furman helped me be a better interviewer, a better public speaker, a better, you know, all of those things. So, you know, branch outside, like, you have this time to establish yourself, what your comfort zone is. So make it as you know, wide as possible so that you can, so when you step outside of it, you're really touching areas that may make you uncomfortable at first. But again, you heard all these paths. It's not always your first choice, your second choice, your third. Sometimes you just kind of luck into something, or it's just by being adventurous and exploring. And also too, don't get caught up in how it looked or how you think that path is supposed to look right away. Like we had a stigma in our generation. I think everybody can speak to this, of like, even like going back home. Like there was a stigma about that. You don't have to get it right after school, right after Furman. You don't have to know what you're doing right away. Like I said, I was fortunate enough to know, and I was on that path, but I could have done something else. I think Christina was saying like it was her senior year and she didn't know right away, and that's okay. Like there'll be opportunities, but just don't panic is what I'm saying. And then just one thing I didn't do very well is network, which has already been mentioned, but make those connections, especially in our industry, because I had incredible mentors when I got to the News, folks who had been there working longer than I had been alive at the time. And now when I got into that position where I had, you know, knowledge that I could share, wisdom that I could share, I was out. Like there was no one else to share it with. We were, you know, it was 3 of us. When I got there were like 12 sports reporters. Now, when I left, there were 3. You know, that's just the nature of the business. So So we have all of this stuff that we want to lend to people. We're all in our industry as storytellers, sports storytellers. We get excited when people are interested in our industry because it has all these bag marks about it. Like we're on those rankings. It's like sports journalists, and like I won't say anything. Just not to. Every job has dignity, so I won't mention it. But you get what I'm saying. So we have all this stuff to share, and we're willing to share it. So please reach out, as John said earlier.
Great, Manny. Thank you. Dylan, I think you're our most recent graduate, so tell us a little bit about your experience at Furman. Anything in particular that was really helpful in getting you to where you are today? Any advice for our current students?
Yeah. I would say one of the things that I find so amazing at Furman is just the ability to learn such diverse things there. I think Manny kind of touched on it earlier, but there's so many different avenues and different subjects and courses that you can take that you can really just expand your level of thinking so much there. So I'd say in tow with that, be curious, right? Like really look into what different courses you can take and what different avenues you can take, and just be curious about it, pursue it. Sometimes things don't always come off as they seem right away. Like you can find the avenue that you want to get to through 1,000 different paths, right? So I would say sometimes even if you don't think it might lead to sports, like John, he didn't think he was going to get to sports, but he found his way. And that was just all through kind of expanding his horizons, and then kind of Christina touched on it a bit, but the Furman advantage and just really getting involved and conducting research, especially in a STEM field. I kind of work in like science and analytics, and learning how to conduct research properly and how to take in like data from research is such an important thing. But I think it also gives you an opportunity to get involved, and I think sometimes that involvement isn't always like going to return monetary value for you. You might have to volunteer and it be free, or you might be lucky enough to get a project and get paid for it. But, I would say just get involved and take opportunities to research, to do different projects, to work for different organizations, even if it's just taking statistics for the Furman sports teams. Or even just conducting like an ad hoc project yourself and then trying to talk to the sports teams about it. There's so many different avenues that you can use that you just really have to be curious about it and take a chance with them.
Thank you, Dylan. Yeah, I know several of you have mentioned research as a great experience. I think Furman's really unique in that we have such a strong undergraduate research program. In almost every academic department at Furman, you can do some type of research with our faculty. So if that's something you're interested in getting involved with, definitely encourage you to reach out to your faculty.
Lauren, can I jump in one more time? Sorry.
Yeah, please do.
I would also say don't be scared to pitch something that you've thought of, right? So just an example that I'm thinking of right now, like, here I am working at a professional sports team. I've had a couple of people in my tenure here be like, hey, I'm an aspiring data analyst. I'm looking for kind of experience in things. Is there certain data sets that you can give me that I can analyze and try to like come up with different conclusions than you might think in your role? And that's not something that they're ever going to get paid for, but that's an impression that they can make on me that A, I might want to hire them when they graduate. And B, I also might recommend to all the different people that I know in the soccer industry and the football industry and the baseball industry, So don't be afraid to reach out to people. Reach out to us. Even just try and, find people that you might not even know. But if you reach out to them and just say, hey, I want to help you. How can I help? I really want to do data analytics. I want to become a dietitian, I think things like that, people don't do that enough, and it can really help.
Great advice. Thank you, Dylan. So I've got a couple of additional questions that I'm going to kind of ask individuals. And then I want to make sure that we still have time at the end for students to ask questions as well. But John, I know in your role at Monumental Sports, you oversee the talent acquisition team, I believe there. So I think, the name of the panel was how to break into a career in sports. Most of us know that it's typically pretty competitive to get into these roles in sports. So I'm just curious from your perspective and working with your talent acquisition team, what is it that really makes a candidate stand out from the competition?
I think for working in sports, you cannot be a passive candidate. So you need to be a little more intentional with how you're trying to make connections. Connections. I'm going to talk about networking. But again, that powerful tool of LinkedIn. One pro tip here, have the LinkedIn app on your phone. Like that should be something that when you're meeting a professional, you're saying, oh, can I connect with you on LinkedIn? And sort of start building your network because then they can help connect you with other people. For me, I think it's looking at it can come in many different forms because you may have a student athlete who didn't necessarily have the opportunity to do a bunch of summer internships, but I can see where they were committed and where they were able to be, a student and an athlete and how that contributed to their success. And then you have some people who are, not a student athlete, so maybe they were able to do some internships. And you have myself. I had one internship when I was a summer camp counselor. It can all work out, but I think it's about the story that you tell and try to figure out what the value is that you can add. I think storytelling allows you to stand out. So in my honest opinion, in these entry-level roles that we're filling, everybody's resume looks the same, roughly. Everybody's resume looks the same. It's the people that take the time and attention, especially for entry-level roles, to submit a cover letter because you're telling me something more about yourself outside of your resume. You're telling me a story. When you get into those interviews, do your research on folks. So if you're interviewing with anyone here, you want to make that connection. Hey, I saw you went to Furman. Or I've had folks that say, I didn't go to Furman, but some of my high school classmates went to Furman. And everyone's saying, you have such a beautiful campus. Boom. When I've talked to 20 people that day, I remember that one connection from Furman or that, oh, I saw you. Are you from Greenville, South Carolina? Oh, yeah, that's my hometown. So figure out how you can make those personal connections. And I also say, don't overthink the interview process. You need to be comfortable. You need to come in and be yourself. But also make sure you are prepared. You don't want it to feel forced. You want it to feel organic. An interview should happen. It should be a conversation of sorts. And then next, I would say with us being in this digital world that we are now, and Gen Z coming up, you're probably much more, native digital folks than I am. But this platform, these interview panels, these digital video things are not going away. So you need to be comfortable with that. And one thing I'll say is that millennials and Gen Z, sometimes we are used to having the ability to curate what we see and what we post. So you think about a social media feed. I can take that picture 100 times and put 3 filters on it. It's just right. I want to make sure that we understand when you're going into an interview, you don't have the time to curate. You don't have the time to do it again. So I need you to practice what is that first impression. And I've started to notice that because of the digital landscape and the ability to edit and crop and redo, sometimes people fall short in that space. So make sure you are practicing that. And let me tell you an easy way to practice that. I want you to go out to, go to a place you've never been before, whether it's a store, a coffee shop, or a bar, and just have small talk with people. Because I want you to start practicing having small talk. I think sometimes in the digital space, you can curate who you're interacting with. I want to make sure that you understand that I can interact with people from different backgrounds or people that I don't know at all. And I think one way you get that in college is group projects and group assignments. Those same people who did do work in the assignment in college are the same folks that you work with in real life. And then you have the people who do it all. Those same personalities show up. So make sure you transfer all of that. But I think those are ways in which you can stand out, get comfortable with the technology, do your research, figure out a personal connection, some sort of connective tissue and a theme that you can put out there in that interview. But most importantly, you have to get to the interview. If you're like me, the hardest thing is getting my foot in the door. I feel like if I can get in front of you, I'm going to captivate you. But it's that, how do I get off paper? And so I would say that's where you can't be passive. Start trying to figure out who do I know that works at that company? Can I have an informational with them? Or even when you see an opportunity, just reach out to who you think is the hiring manager to try to just pitch yourself. One quick story of what not to do. You don't want to email. So in sports, typically there's email addresses listed on the website. I had an intern, I can't remember what the internship was, but they literally emailed everyone in the company their cover letter and resume. I advise against that because guess what happened to me as the HR person? I got that email forwarded to me 50 times. So if you want to do a marketing internship, why did you email the general counsel? Why did you email the CR group? Be strategic in who you're reaching out to because it sort of puts you didn't have a strategy here. you just shot something and want to see what will stick. So that does not work to your advantage. So be strategic in trying to build and curate those relationships.
That's great advice from someone that's in the position to hire folks. And I love the advice about the cover letters, because I see so many people not doing the cover letters. And, that's one of the things the Mullen Center is here to help you with. We can help you really tailor your resume to the particular position and make sure you have a strong cover letter, so you really do stand out from the applicant pool. Thanks, John. Dylan, I think you shared earlier that you kind of got into your current role because you did an internship with that organization. As our most recent alumni, I just wanted to see if you had any advice for our students about the job search, or any strategies that you wanted to share that were helpful for you when you were going through the process.
My apologies there. So yeah, I would say one of the first things that I would say is when you do get to the phase where you're starting to look for different jobs and opportunities, don't be afraid to reach out to your network. The job that I landed at the Chicago Fire was actually through a Furman alum. So somebody working at the fire, and I reached out to him and said, "Hey, I saw that you have this position open. I'd really love it if you could get this to the right person for me." And that's exactly what they did. So I would say definitely use your network. One of the things that I think is cool about Furman is people will go all over the country. People will go all over the world. I have friends that are in like every continent from my time at Furman. So you probably have a connection like pretty much everywhere around the country, so use that to your advantage, even if it's just, "Hey, who do you know that you could possibly get me in with?" I think that that's something that's kind of underutilized. And then another tidbit of advice, I kind of mentioned this earlier, but I would say, especially for like in my field of work, projects is very, very important. Like, what do you do outside of school? What do you do outside of your curriculum? I think that goes a long way. Like, do you sometimes work on like data analytics projects in your free time to kind of enrich yourself? And then, I think one of the big things that helped me was I actually did a project during my master's degree with the city of San Antonio, where I helped them analyze their 311 non-emergency service calls, and was able to kind of leverage that project and some of the implications that I was able to help the city of San Antonio start from that in getting my current role today.
Thanks, Dylan. So in just a few minutes, we're going to open it up to some questions from the students. So feel free to add your questions to the Q&A, and we'll get to those in just a minute. I did have a student reach out and was really curious about graduate school, and is graduate school something that is a requirement to get into this field? And I'm sure it's very different for all of your different areas. But I know, Christina, you went directly to graduate school and got your master's in nutrition, I believe. So do you want to talk a little bit about is graduate school necessary? What I would suspect for your field, it probably was.
Yeah, so I think it's going to be officially in 2024, the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics will require a graduate degree before you can start your internship. So again, every dietitian has to go through a dietetic internship, and it's a match process, kind of like a residency, but they're going to require that you have a master's degree by 2024. I went ahead and pursued my master's degree because I had a biology degree, which actually was great, and I think benefited me in ways that maybe someone who had a nutrition undergrad major wouldn't have. And so that was actually really helpful, having that degree first and then pursuing the master's in a more specialized area like nutrition. So if you were thinking about pursuing dietetics out of Furman, I think it's totally possible. Having some kind of science, so whether it's biology, chemistry, a health science degree, any of those can translate pretty easily into the dietetics coursework. And so if you have questions about that or you're interested in that, I'd love to answer them. A lot of it is just reaching out to different programs and finding out if, like your coursework can transfer and if it would work. and a lot of them are willing to work with you on that. So they like people who come from non-nutrition backgrounds as well. A lot of times that translates pretty well. So.
And Manny, I think I heard you say earlier that going and getting your master's degree was one of the best decisions you made. So would like to hear about how essential do you feel like a master's degree is to your work?
Oh, wow. It would take the rest of the time to explain all of the benefits of it. One, because it was just an incredible program. So, once I got to the news, I thought I was just going to be a writer. And that was my wheelhouse, and that's what I love to do. And I was having success there. And then right around 2007, back then, our company we still owned like newspapers and television stations. So we had this convergence training where these newspaper folks went to Nashville, spent a week in Nashville, and learned how to make videos for our website. And it was one of those things also that extended my career there at the news. It was like anytime something new came. So whether it was video, whether it was social media, whether it was audience engagement, I embraced it. It was like, hey, this is what we have to do, and not just like, hey, just do it because they say do it, but also try to find how it works for me. Like how can I make it work? So with the video thing, like as soon as we got back from Nashville, me and the photographer that went, we started cranking out all kind of video series. We started doing like our own version of Sports Center for high schools here. And it took off and it did well because one, there was nothing else like it. That was a way for us to even compete with YFF here. So that just kind of like that storytelling and video filmmaking bug was ignited in me. And so once this program came around and Dr. Armstrong put that bug in my ear, the first thing was like, just go get a master's. It's like, I don't care what it is. You do an online thing, have it, something applicable to your position, but just go get one. And then at that time, Wake Forest, the program was at the University of Florida, and they moved it to Wake Forest. They lost funding there. They moved it to Wake Forest. And so then they started this sports storytelling element of it. And it was supposed to be a 2-year program with one of the producers of the documentary film, Hoop Dreams, who's now a mentor of mine, and then Chris Webber was working into a former NBA player. So I was like, no brainer, right? And so I got there, and they're like, hey, you stay another year, you can get the terminal degree. And I was like, sounds good. And so I went and got that. And so that immediately, like the first day, everything about that program, I could apply immediately. And like one, it was just a cool experience. Like one of my classes was to go and shoot the All-Star game when it was in Charlotte. Like that was a class. Like, okay, no brainer again. So like, and then it also allowed me to make the transition into full-time teaching, which has been great for me. Like at that point in my life, and like really wanting to get out of the grind of being a sports writer, it just worked out well. So there's so many ways it worked out for me. But I found a program that even if I didn't start teaching, I could apply that. So as soon as I got like the first year, I started making films for the Greenville News, and they won awards, and they got on PBS and all this kind of stuff. So it was that made the Greenville News happy because I was taking that time away from the office, but they were getting something out of the deal as well. So it made everybody happy. I look back on like I was telling you before we got on, it's like I was living in Columbia, working in Greenville, going to school in Winston-Salem. I don't really know how I did it. Also was a full-time dad and husband at the time. And it's like, but we just, somehow we made it work. And it's been, I look back on it now fondly, but probably was some crazy times during that, a lot of 5-hour interview, but it worked out. And so, but just find out whatever works for you. I think that's what kind of been the theme of what we're saying here. It's not like, I would tell people that and they're like, man, that's crazy. Yeah, it probably was, but we make it work because we wanted it to work. And so once you figure out what your passion is, like you don't have, like we say, like you got to sit there, you're not going to be able to like brainstorm and write down every little step of your plan. But if you figure out what your passion is, then that'll help you govern every decision. So every time you speak to someone, every connection that you make, every job or internship that you accept or pursue, it flows out of that passion. So that helps your decision making so much easier because you know what fits you. It's like I was saying, my decision to get out of the business is when I realized that what I was being asked to do at that job didn't fit with my passion, didn't fit in my my ideology or whatever. And so that's when I knew it's time for me to get out. And so that decision was easy for me. People say, well, you had another free trip to New Orleans. But no, that's not what it was about. It didn't fit my passion anymore. So once you figure out what that is, everything else will fall into place.
Thank you, Manny. So I want to go ahead and jump over to some of the questions that are coming in. And if there's anybody out there that has other questions, feel free to go ahead and type them into the Q&A. So here's an interesting question that just came in from Emily. She must be a student athlete, and she's asking, do you have any suggestions for a student athlete on how to balance their busy schedule with networking and making those connections? I don't know. I know Christina and Dylan, you all both played sports. Do either of you want to kind of talk about that?
Sure. I would say talk to your SIDs. They're really connected to a lot of people in the sports world. Volunteer to work some games if in your off season. So if you're off in the fall or spring, work some of the opposite sports and just get to know the people in the press box, get to know the people that are calling games or that are doing stats, because chances are they know somebody, they know a lot of people. It's a pretty small world. SIDs, it's a pretty small world for sports information. It's a pretty small world, for game ops people, or for, if you want to volunteer to help with team ops or something like that. That's a really big part of the sports world as well. So you don't have to go far. I think there's a lot of really good opportunities just here at Furman and people that can plug you in. I know Todd Duke at Furman was someone that I just kind of came in contact tangentially through working some games, but he's been here forever and he knows everybody. And so there's a lot of really good resources kind of just within the athletic department here.
Anything, Dylan, you want to add to that?
I think she kind of hit it all, to be honest. Just utilize the network that you have, right? Like it's actually insane how far just the network of student athletes at Furman, which really isn't that large of a subset, can expand, right? So utilize them, talk to your coaches. Sometimes they'll have connections or, past alumni that have gone on to be in different roles. Like sometimes my old coach reaches out to me whenever there's guys from the soccer team that are looking to get into the sports world and asks me for whatever advice I can give them. So just explore all different avenues. It's a big network that doesn't seem that big, but it's quite a big spider web, I would say.
Thank you. I appreciate that, Dylan. This question came in. I think it's for you, John. Is there an appreciable difference working in traditional sports versus esports? Are there more opportunities in one field than the other?
So I've been doing some research on esports. We launched 2 esports teams, so it was different for me because I grew up. I think it was like, if you like playing video games, one day you can make the games, not like have a career by continuing to play the games. So I think there's probably equal opportunity. I do think the esports is much larger in the European market. It's slowly gravitating this way, but you're starting to see more and more opportunities in esports. But I would say, be strategic. Again, if you're passionate about esports, there's nothing but upside. When you look at the impacts of a pandemic, that changes what this traditional sports landscape may look like. We're still not on the other side of that. My job, we don't have fans in the arena. We're playing games, but there's no fans. So esports is something that is already in that digital space. So I see there's a lot of opportunity for that to sort of push and continue to move forward. And as you see with my organization, we were a traditional sports company, but we are starting to get into that esports landscape as well. Our NBA 2K team was the previous, they won the NBA 2K championship for 2020. So phenomenal. Mind blowing. It's fun. It's exciting. So I would say there's probably equal footing. If you have one passion over the other, go for it. But I think most traditional sports are going to start sort of getting into that arm just because of the revenue growth opportunities. It's like this untapped market. I've done some research on ESL Gaming. I encourage you to look them up, but they essentially are a group that does, they create the game, what is it called? Like the conferences. It's not conferences, but like Coachella for esports. That's how I compare it. The Essence Fest of esports. And they have these huge conferences where it's like a lifestyle brand, similar to like a Comic-Con. Like it's tons of interest, but I'm seeing it much bigger in the European market than it is in the US market currently. But that is all slowly but surely changing. So there's a lot of upside coming with esports. So if you want to get in something kind of on the ground level, I would definitely recommend esports.
Great. Anyone else have any thoughts about the esports?
And one thing I'll add really quick, I put in some links in the chat. So I encourage you to open them up and save them. A lot of different sports forums, communities, job boards that if you're not already aware of, definitely check it out. And I'll say one thing, Dylan is in a hot spot. He's probably humbling himself a little bit, but data analytics is like the driver right now. Everyone is looking for quality people that can do data analytics. But he probably understands the notion of storytelling because his job can be very technical, but he has to find a fine balance of saying, okay, I understand what all this means, but my client does not. So I may be his client. So I need him to break that down for me all the way to the simplest form so I can understand what is this data telling us. But those opportunities are endless right now, especially in sports, but even outside of sports. And guess what? You can sort of command the market as far as compensation for those opportunities.
Yeah, I think John's right. Data analytics is really hot right now, and Furman actually just launched a data analytics minor.
Wow.
So our students will have the opportunity to minor in data analytics moving forward. So very exciting. This question, I think probably Manny, you might be able to address this, but any tips on best way for someone to break into sports broadcasting?
Oh, okay. Start where you are. Start where you are right now with broadcasting. If you like, we talked. Christina mentioned this earlier about the SIDs. There, I will say this: even though Furman's a small place, Hunter Reed, the sports information director, is one of the most respected men in that field, respected people in that field. Period. And it was such a blessing to my career. So start there, reach out to him, but then also like because we're in this digital age. You can start a show now. I have students here at USC that have all of them. Every one of them have a podcast. Now they're not all good, but they have one. So like start one. And I recommend like figure out what the market needs. So what is the market missing? I was talking to a student earlier about this. We don't need any more sports debate. We don't need any more. We have enough PTI. We have enough First Take. We have enough whatever. Figure out some way that you can stand out in a saturated market. But then that also gives you experience. That shows that you know how to edit. That shows that you can be good on camera. You can be good on the air. Start writing. So go out, like I'll tell you right now, when I started covering Furman for the Greenville News, I was flying out to Missouri and to Auburn for those early season mismatches where, we sometimes get beat by 40 points. We take our check and we come back. They were flying me out for those games. When I left the Greenville News, we couldn't afford to have a full-time Furman beat report. So there is the market that you're in, the Greenville market, including from the Greenville News and the Independent Mail to the WSPA, WYFF, LOS, they don't have that coverage. And Furman deserves that coverage. And you can fill that void. And you don't have to do it. Not to say if anybody works for the Paladin, you don't have to do it through the Paladin. You can do it on your own. And if you're good and you market it well, and that's something that your generation knows better how to market through social media, then you can be. There's no reason why you can't compete with the big guys in the market. I tell that to our students here. They seem intimidated by the State and the Post-Courier. It's like, no, if you break news. If you tell great stories and you have polished and compelling video and audio, and it's something that people want, then they will come to it. So, and you can just start where you are. It doesn't have to be, all the bells and whistles and be polished. Just start and get practice. And if you have something like if you're putting something together and you need someone with seasoned eyes to look, I got real seasoned eyes, old eyes to look at it. Send it to me. And I'll say, hey, this is pretty good. Here's where you can improve. That's how you can leverage that connection. But just start, and it's okay. You don't have to get that internship. Just start where you are.
Thank you, Manny. I want to be respectful of everyone's time, and I know that we are at 8 o'clock at this point. So I think maybe I know there's still a few questions out there, but I would encourage those students do what John said. LinkedIn with LinkedIn with these panelists and start connecting with these panelists. So I think I want to wrap us up with one kind of double question. So a question came in about your favorite course at Furman that has been most applicable to your professional life. So maybe share that with us, and then any last piece of advice that you really wish someone had given you when you were a senior about ready to graduate from Furman, or I guess it could be really any year at Furman. So maybe Rochelle, can I start with you?
Sure. So favorite course. So honestly, I don't have like a lot of recollection of like specific courses. What I'll say about Furman is like, it makes you're going to be great at whatever you go to next, whether it's like grad school, a job, like they're preparing you to succeed in the way that you think, in the way that you problem solve. And that liberal arts education, like people might, make fun or say what it's valuable. And it will, if you, to John's point, if you get in the door, you'll be able to show why it puts you ahead of the next group. And I will say, Manny already gave a shout out to Dr. Armstrong. I did a storytelling like summer class with him, and that was an amazing course. And at the end of the day, so much of what is at the heart of sports is about storytelling, and it's moving there more and more. Like you see the connection between the fans, the players, what's happening with social justice movements, with everything that's going on. That's going to be a big piece of learning how to tell stories effectively and learning what audiences you're trying to tell those stories to, I think will help you regardless. If you're a dietitian, right? Who are you trying to tell that story of health to? How are you trying to tell it to them? What neighborhood did they grow up in to help them understand how they can be healthy? So I think storytelling is a huge piece. And then what someone would have told me. I think honestly, like everyone who's on this, you guys are so far ahead of where I was to even know there was like a career to break into in sports. So congratulations and, joining this and starting there. But just that the sports world is a really, it's big, but it's small. Everyone's connected. Manny, I think you mentioned John Solomon. Is he now at the Aspen Institute and leading that program? Yeah. So he's amazing. Worked with him. I, mentioned Dylan and Jessica. So it is that interconnected world. So find a way that you can get in and, take that in and start to build those connections. And you never know like what in it will be. It doesn't have to be at the very top. It can be someone that, they mention in the press box at Furman. Maybe it's a local community member who has a basketball team. So I think figure out what is your connection and your in into the sports world and start to grow that because we know each other. And so it will only help that you're able to connect with someone in that world.
Awesome. Thank you, Rochelle. How about Dylan? You want to share with us your favorite course and any advice that you want to leave our students with?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's hard to identify like a favorite course, to be honest. I think the thing that I can say about that is I'm very thankful for the major that I chose. So with doing physics, it's not necessarily the direct path you would think to the field that I'm in right now. But one thing I can say is that the professors in the physics department and the courses that I took just really taught me how to A, be curious, B, explore all avenues, and C, just be able to analyze the problem, to be honest. I think that's one of the biggest things is like to not freak out, right? Like no matter what field you're in, things can get stressful and you'll be tasked with a problem and it'll be like, we need an answer right now or by the end of the day, and it's like, I think one of the biggest things that my professors at Furman, and a couple of them are on here. So hi, Dr. Moffitt and hi, Dr. D'Amato. But, they really prepared me to get tasked with difficult problems that I might not know the answer to right away. But they showed me how I can get myself there and really to figure out how to methodically answer that problem. And I think that's such an important thing. As far as advice that I wish someone would have given me, I wish that they would have done a call like this whenever I was in college, to be honest. I don't think I really was not like ever saw anything like this. And if there was, I either missed it or was kind of just too dumb to even notice that it was happening. So I think everybody on this panel seems so bright and like they're doing such a great job in their field. So I would just say heed the advice of everyone else that you've heard tonight. They're fantastic professionals, seem like wonderful people, and, just take their advice. They know what they're talking about.
Thank you, Dylan. All right, let's go to Christina.
Okay, my favorite course, it was not my favorite at the time. It was really hard, but it was most applicable was biochemistry. And nutrition is essentially applied biochemistry. So I think a lot of times nutrition gets this rap of being like kind of like home ec, but no, it's a hard science, and it's when it boils down, it's biochemistry. And so having that early on at Furman was super helpful. Learning the Krebs cycle, all those things was super important. And then again, helped me in grad school, kind of revisiting a lot of those topics that had already been covered. And then I think advice that I wish I would have gotten maybe at Furman was I think Dylan kind of touched on this, just learning how to flex your critical thinking skills and doing things that are hard and seem way out of your comfort zone and may not even apply to what you ultimately want to do, but are going to force you to like problem solve and think critically. And so I think about these research experiences that I had, and even doing the research that I did in my master's wasn't applied to sports necessarily, but it really forced me to look at a problem, do it 3 times and have it not work and have to go back and forth and figure out a way to problem solve, and then to think critically about what I was doing so that I didn't have to do it 4 times the next time I did it. And so I think that's something that I learned a little bit later on, but I wish maybe someone would have encouraged me to do earlier on in my career at Furman.
How about John? Can you recommend any favorite classes?
Dr. Cynthia King in the communications department. She has a special place in my heart. I think you sometimes have professionals and people that come in your life to see potential in you that you don't see in yourself just yet. And so I appreciated her giving me that confidence from just a public speaking standpoint, which sort of touched on the storytelling, just how to present. And I think you really get those moments from just being a product of Furman. And I would say the advice I would give to, my senior self is to go with the flow, enjoy the journey, trust the process, give yourself some grace, especially everyone coming out of school right now in a global pandemic. Take it easy on yourself. You have tons of time to go and do. I tell my wife often that where I am today, I could have never told you when I graduated from Furman. Never did I envision this. So be able to go with the flow and swerve. Michelle Obama said it best, her book. She's like, you got to just swerve. Go where the opportunities are, but don't be afraid to swerve. And I want to give a quick shout out to Cole Neely. He wins the award for giving me a LinkedIn request that quick. So shout out to you, my friend. We're going to set up a time to talk. But yes, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, John. I love that advice. And we definitely share a mutual affection for Dr. King. She's awesome. And Manny, I'm going to let you close this out.
Okay. Now my favorite class was the Jazz Age that I took with Dr. Olson. I can't remember, other than using a reference to Louis Armstrong or Miles Davis in a lead at one point. I don't know how it applied to my career, but that's definitely my favorite class. The other one I think is probably the one that applies most was my media law class with Dr. Armstrong, because I was never sued. So that worked out well. But I only took 2 real journalism classes there. I mean, we know this is, I'm teaching in a J school now, a real J school now, but I understand being here at USC, I appreciate the liberal arts education that's been mentioned by the other panelists in this question, but it's different, y'all, and it'll help you so much. But the piece of advice that I wish I had received is that, hey, you get to define what success is for you. Right. And when I got started in this, I wanted to find the highway, left lane, hammer down all the way to Bristol, Connecticut to get to ESPN as fast as I could. I thought that was what success meant in my business. I wanted to be Stuart Scott. And I never made it out of the same newsroom. But I enjoyed when I dropped that, like it was still would have been a cool goal. But when I dropped that need, that was the way that I defined it. When I dropped that definition of it, I started to enjoy what I was doing. I started to pay attention to where I was. It's to use old Dabo Sweeney saying, I had to bloom where I was planted, right? And so then I was able to enjoy everything about it. And again, like I said before, the beat kind of grew up around me. But then I was able to define it. It wasn't about how many people were reading my stories or how many awards I was winning or the book deal and all that stuff. It was about I was enjoying what I was doing. I felt like I was doing something that was benefiting my community. I was telling stories, not just chronicling a team winning a championship, but I was telling stories about, economic disparity and how the money was moving and all of these things, and trying to do something that I thought could make a difference with my gift. And so you can define what success is for you. It doesn't have to fit someone else's definition.
Awesome. Thank you. What a great way to end. And, as we come to a conclusion tonight, I just want to say a big thank you to our alumni panelists. All of the stories you shared, the advice you offered was just really inspirational. And I really appreciate you giving up your evenings to be with us tonight. So thank you very much. And also a big thank you to all the students and the faculty that joined us tonight. I hope you enjoyed the presentation, and I hope everyone has a really good evening. Thank you.